Hello everyone and welcome to the New Normal Speaker Series. My name is Gjoko and I'm the director of the Ullman School of Design. The topic that I would like to address today is creativity. When we are faced with new and unforeseen challenges, such as the ones that we are experiencing today, we don't really have ready-made solutions at hand to help us overcome these challenges. We need to envision new solutions and generate new and original ideas. In other words, we need to be creative. My special guest today is Natalie Nixon, a creativity strategist and author of the book, The Creativity Leap. Natalie and I both work together with IBM on defining the future of design education, and we are both members of the Forbes Councils. Natalie, welcome to the New Normal Speaker Series.
Thank you, Gjoko. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being my guest. So, some people describe creativity as a way of living a life that embraces originality and makes unique connections between seemingly disparate ideas. Others describe creativity as an ability to invent or create something new. This is a particularly important skill to have, especially in times of global disruption. So let's start with the basics. How can we define creativity?
So I love both of those definitions because they talk about inventiveness, originality, that they deal with the way we approach problems and this idea of juxtaposition, what sometimes I refer to it as the remix. But the definition that I've landed on, the way I like to think about creativity, is that it's our ability to toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems. And sometimes I just stop there, and to keep it really simple, toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems. But there's another element there, which is in order to produce novel value. And that's very important because in my experience with my client work, some companies are going through what I call innovation churn. And what they're not realizing is they have to actually pause and start with creativity, because creativity is the engine for innovation.
Why creativity is an essential competency, especially today?
It's an essential competency for today because we are, as a lot of us are familiar with this term VUCA. We are living in a VUCA world that's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And specifically in this moment, Gjoko, you and I are talking in early November of the year 2020, and we're going through what I call a triple pandemic. Not just the pandemic that's COVID, but it's a pandemic that is affecting us on the level of health, of societal issues, and our environment. And so I call out COVID-19, systemic racism, and the unsustainability of our earth. The truth is, we're not going to be able to navigate complexity with a simple linear Gantt chart. You will be quickly very frustrated if you try to apply that sort of linear process. I like to call it the chewing gum method, is what we have to embrace. And so what I mean by that is that we have to navigate complexity, this triple pandemic, with complexity. And I call it the chewing gum method because if you've ever gotten chewing gum stuck on your skin, the best way to remove chewing gum is with more chewing gum. And to cut it, tack it off. So the best way to navigate complexity is with complexity. And as it turns out, creativity is a complex system.
Creativity, as you described, is the very essence that drives innovation. How would you describe the relationship between creativity and innovation? Can you maybe also provide some examples?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I say that creativity is the engine for innovation, I guess I should also pause and give my opinion about what innovation is. So I think that innovation is invention converted into value. And that value could be financial value, social value, cultural value. But when it's still only an invention, it's not yet an innovation, right? It needs a conversion process. And that converter is creativity. So I'll give an example. This summer, you kindly referenced my new book, The Creativity Leap. It came out in June, and I was sharing a lot of copies to supporters and advocates and colleagues and friends, and I was at the post office a lot. And I went to this one post office, I'm waiting in line, And I get to the counter, and it's during COVID, so there's a lot of glass shields up. And while I'm waiting for the gentleman to add up what I owe, I notice in front of me, there's a container of Q-tips, ear swabs. And I thought, why are there ear swabs at the counter? And I asked him, I said, excuse me, why are there Q-tips in the front? He said, oh, that's because of COVID, and it's for people to pick up one and they can tap the, what do you call it, the credit card keypad with the Q-tip instead of with their finger. Now, that's a clever invention, right? That somebody saw a need, a problem. People don't want to get their skin contaminated. So here's a little swap. That's not an innovation. And it won't become an innovation until it actually leverages value at scale. So then 2 months later, I'm flipping through a catalog. As an entrepreneur, I'm always looking for interesting ways to spread the word about my ideas and my services and my offering. And so it's one of these catalogs where you can, make sustainable tote bags and key rings. Well, one of the things that they were featuring is, I don't even know the name of it, but it's part key ring, and it's also a hook, and it has a pointer. You can use it during the time of COVID to open doors, to push keypads. So here's someone who solved a similar problem, but now they have developed a product, a little product. Who knows if it will really take off, but it's now being manufactured at scale. It's going to produce some sort of financial value for this company. And it also might become even kind of a cultural meme, who knows? So that's what I mean when I talk about, that's how I see the relationship between creativity, invention, and maybe I should say it in this way, invention, creativity, and innovation. They're all interrelated, but they are distinct.
That's a pretty good example, actually. And I think that we will see more and more of this type of inventions/innovations coming up. I think people are particularly good at coming up with new innovative ways of dealing with problems in a state of crisis.
Yes.
It's out of that sheer necessity that forces you to just revisit many of the things you take for granted.
Absolutely. I like to say that creativity loves constraints. It loves constraints on time, constraints on money, constraints on people resources. It's almost like we need that pressure cooker effect in order to drive inventiveness and to be more resourceful and to juxtapose things, objects, ideas that previously would have never put together.
I find the very same thing applying in design in general. The worst thing I think for a designer is like to say, here is a blank canvas, do whatever you want. It's like, where do I start? And what's the purpose of the design? So yes. Designers generally thrive when you have constraints. And that's where the really good design emerges. Because otherwise, the equivalent, well, not equivalent, but the juxtaposition of that is art. You have a blank canvas and you see what happens. But design is very, very different. You really need constraints, and you need to navigate through those constraints in order to produce a good solution.
Right.
So this is, it's a skill, creativity. It's a very interesting skill to have. And many reports on Industry 4.0 say that the demand for soft skills, such as creativity, is expected to grow significantly across all job sectors in the near future. As automation and artificial intelligence replace more and more jobs, the ability to think creatively will be considered as one of the most critical skills for future industry leaders. What are your thoughts on this?
I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Please share them.
I like to collect signals on the landscape. The work that you and I do, Gjoko, is very important to be super observant of the present. I have a very loopy background in cultural anthropology and fashion. And in anthropology, we're trained to frame questions very differently. I like to say from the worm's eye view, not the bird's eye view, which is kind of from sociology and economics and political science. And then fashion is a very underappreciated and misunderstood sector in terms of what so many other industries can learn from it. I worked as an entrepreneurial hat designer. I then worked in global sourcing for a division of the limited brands and lived in Sri Lanka and Portugal, making underwear for Victoria's Secret. And what I learned from working in the fashion industry is a deep appreciation for financial acumen, for logistics and supply chain management, but also an appreciation for the role of beauty and desire and aesthetics. I like to collect a lot of signals. I'm just adding all that in to say that that's part of the way my mind works because of that training, because of that background. One of the signals I started collecting like 5 years ago was when the World Economic Forum started producing, similar projections. And in 2015, they said that creativity would rank as the number 10 job skill by 2020. 1 year later in 2016, they said, actually, we think it's going to be the number 3 job skill. We also see creativity showing up as being valued in our popular culture. I reference a lot of television shows, like, I don't know if you watch the show Billions, but in Billions, there's a character named Wendy Rhodes. She's a psychologist, and she is working at this really aggressive venture capital firm called Axe Capital. But what was fascinating to me is you have this professional who is really grounded in the humanities. She's sitting along with the CTO, the CFO, the founder, and she's helping people at the company explore their inner child and meditate and do deep breathing and visualization. These are also memes and indicators and signals on how valuable these so-called soft skills are, like empathy, like collaboration, like curiosity, like being able to anticipate what's next. And the truth of the matter is that we are in the fourth industrial revolution. The train has left the station. And what the fourth industrial revolution is characterized by is technology everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's in the Alexa app. It's our students, your students are using it to do research through Google search engines. That's artificial intelligence. And through augmented reality is the Alexa app. And surgeries are done through robotics. So it's here. And there are going to be casualties. There will be jobs lost. It's not all a total rosy picture, but it's not all frightening either. And in my view, the opportunity is that as technology is replacing a lot of tasks, it's actually going to mean there's more opportunity for the human to show up in our organizations, in our work. And organizations need to start figuring out how to hire for creativity, cultivate creativity, and sustain it. It used to be, say 15 years ago, if you were not a tech company, whether you were in education, healthcare, food and bev, you were lost, you were gone. You had to figure out how to integrate technology into your core value proposition. Today, in my opinion, if you're not a creativity company, you're in trouble. Whether you're in education, healthcare, technology, it doesn't matter. Creativity has to be the core of what we do because of all of these signals that technology is going to do kind of the mundane stuff. I realize there's artificial imagination. I realize that there's intuitive machinery. I get all that. And still, there are irreplicable aspects and dimensions of being human that we have to amplify.
I absolutely agree with you. And that is definitely one of the biggest areas for development and growth that we will see in the corporate sector and beyond. So how do you foster creativity as a skill?
So as a skill, that's where what I call the 3 I's come in. So to write the Creativity Leap, I had done a lot of research again over probably the past 4 years or so. I interviewed over 50 people for the book who come from diverse sectors. And I was really trying to test these ideas about toggling between wonder and rigor. And I knew it wasn't enough just to say, okay, guys, toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems. So how do you do that? It's through what I call the 3 I's. And the 3 I's are inquiry, improvisation, and intuition. And inquiry is curiosity. It's asking new questions, different questions, better questions, working with people who are different from you. So building teams that have cognitive diversity that will require you to learn more, to unpack and redefine the way you think about things. I'm a big fan of the work of Warren Berger, who wrote A More Beautiful Question. And he talks about how asking questions is a way of thinking. So one of the ways we can exercise creativity as a skill is to not be afraid of asking new and different questions. It also means that in our educational environments, we have to shift away from just a solutions orientation, what's the answer, to really encouraging questions and curiosity from people so that when they graduate and go into the workforce, that we'll start to pump out a new generation of people who aren't afraid to ask questions and who expect to be in work environments where the leadership also ask questions of themselves. The second thing is improvisation. And a lot of the time we think about improvisation in terms of jazz music, in terms of Saturday Night Live and comedic improv. But when I talk about improvisation, what I mean is we can all become more improvisational in the following way. We can be more adaptive. We can value saying yes and be about the build instead of saying, yeah, but we tried that 10 years ago and it didn't work out, or a flat out no. It's about embracing experimentation, and it's also about falling in love with the process. So if you think about comedic improv or jazz music, they love the process and it's always about the build. So that's what I mean about being more improvisational. And then thirdly, we have to pay attention to our intuition. Now, I was a professor for 16 years. At the last 6 years, I taught as part of a business school, and I created and launched a program called the Strategic Design MBA program. And we were experimenting with a totally different way of leading and building an MBA degree program. So we got rid of kind of stadium seating and sage on stage, and we brought in more of the design pedagogy. So we brought in the studio model of learning, and which requires what I call pattern recognition. So I think about intuition as recognizing patterns. It's that I felt this before, I've seen this before. And when I was doing that work in that chapter of my career, I started to get to know more startup leaders, more entrepreneurial leaders. And I was observing that when they would tell their origin stories, there's always this moment when they will say, something told me not to do the deal. Something told me to work with her and not him. And I thought, this is interesting. I think that something is intuition. I think intuition is pattern recognition, but we don't teach, we don't talk about intuition in business school. We don't talk about it in medical school. We don't talk about it in law school. And yet every successful leader leans into it, embraces it for decision making. So that's another important skill to practice, to listen to it. It's like a muscle. If you keep ignoring your intuition, it will get flabbier. But if you listen to it and use it to help you make decisions, it will get stronger. So it's be more curious, don't be afraid to improvise, and be adaptive and emergent, and listen to that nudge. And those are some of the ways we can practice creativity.
What is the biggest misconception you have come across about when it comes to creativity, in terms of what people generally have as a misconception?
I find that the biggest misconception is that there are creative types. It's this misconception that there is this hallowed special group of people who are imbued with creativity. And there's a couple things that actually are happening when people say things like that. Number one, when you really start to dig deeper, they're actually talking about artists. And yes, artists are using creativity to the maximum level, But creativity and art and artists are not the same thing. Creativity is the means to that end. Creativity is the means to becoming an incredible engineer. Creativity is the means to becoming an incredible entrepreneur, to becoming an incredible farmer, teacher, plumber. But what's happened, the biggest misconception I find is that we've ghettoized creativity in the arts. And when we do that, that's not fair to artists, and it lets us off the hook. What artists are exceptional at and what they are excellent at is they wrestle with the discomfort and the ambiguity of process. Creativity is hard work. And that's what a lot of us don't really, I think at the heart of it, we don't really want to engage with that process, which can be so frustrating at times. You don't have a clear yes or no answer, and you have to sit with it. And then you have to walk away and zoom out. And then you have to bring in people from different perspectives. And then you go into your own zone again. And then you try something else. And then you, what I call, oxygenate it to the world. And in design, we do that through the crit, right? In the arts, performing arts, you do that through the recital. We do this in manufacturing by showing a works in progress, even in art, right? But there has to be moments where you it's scary, it's terrifying, but you show your creation to the world, and maybe they reject it, maybe they love it. So the biggest misconception is that I'm not creative because I can't fill in the blank, draw, sing, act, dance, and that's not acceptable to me. We are all born as humans hardwired for creativity. The difference is whether or not you are spending the time making the space and the environment to exercise your creativity, or you're being lazy about it and you're not putting in the time. Artists put in the time.
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct. Most people think that creativity is a natural born talent. You either got it or you don't. But the reality is that it can be taught.
Yes.
And any one of these examples that you provided actually requires a lot of work to master that skill in order for you to perform it in its excellence. Yes. in many ways. Yes. And otherwise we will be out of job, it's cool. Teaching creativity, like art schools as well.
Right.
But where is all this coming from, this misconception? I think it has roots way down in childhood for most people. It's somehow, I think that some people as children are discouraged by parents or community or even their schools, in some cases, to be creative. It's often following to fall in line is much more of a requirement than being out there exploring, trying new things. What is your take on that?
I've had people share painful memories about a teacher who said, you're no good at that, or that's awful. Why would you do it that way? And when they're talking, in that traditional artistic realm, where we tend to default thinking about creativity. And they're now middle-aged men and they haven't forgotten it. Like it still is in them, that story, that's not for me. I'm not good at that. And sometimes we get messages from our parents who they're trying to look out for us to be practical. And what's practical? Anything that can seemingly safely, logically make you money. Now, thank goodness, I was blessed with parents who, when I was in college, I wanted to impress them. I wanted to please them. I didn't want to disappoint them. I wanted to get a good job after college, but I didn't know what to major in. And I called home crying. And after going through all these explanations about what I didn't like, what I was failing, they said, what do you enjoy? And I finally confessed. I loved anthropology. I loved Africana studies and multidisciplinary studies. And almost at the same time, they said, that's what you should study. And my dad said, if you study what you love, you'll have to turn on opportunities. And it was like this load lifted off me. And I don't come from a family full of wealth and money and privilege where like, oh, go do what you feel like. It was, when I think about it, it was actually quite courageous and liberating for my parents to be willing to say, you study what you love. We trust that the money's going to come, and the money has come. I'm good. And that's what I always have told. I tell that to our daughter. I've told that to any young person who will listen to me, to follow your heart. That's where your creativity, that wonder, and that rigor come into play. No one has to tell you to stay up late longer, to get up earlier, to work harder, because you don't mind digging into the rigor of the skill sets and the minutia that's required to get excellent at your craft or at your field. And can I just for a moment, I realized I didn't do this. Let me also explain how I'm thinking about wonder and rigor. So wonder, I think about as awe and dreaming and asking really big blue sky, audacious questions. And it's also about pausing, which in the United States, we're not really good at. We're not good at like, take a break, pause. We get into these churns. And when we do that, we can't get perspective. When we pause, it helps us to zoom out. Rigor is about discipline. It's about time on task. It's skill development. It is about paying attention to the details. And rigor is not sexy. It's often very solitary. And it's the only way that you create the structure and the boundaries so that you know how to rebound out of them. So it's really important for people to understand that rigor, as I like to say, it's found in the midst of wonder. Sorry, no, that's not how I said it. Wonder is found in the midst of rigor, and rigor cannot be sustained without wonder. People will burn out if there's no wonder. And right now, I see a big challenge in the way that we work, the culture of work. It doesn't encourage wonder. It doesn't realize that as you guys are trying to innovate, you're never going to do that if you don't allow the space and time for the wonder.
That is really well put. And I agree. You need to be, in a sense, liberated from time to time to be able to be creative.
Yes.
And pursuing innovation by following prescribed, processes, it's not going to get you there.
No.
I also see this a lot. Actually, I see this as an issue in design thinking. Most people follow this prescribed process. This is how you do it. But that's only in a school you do that.
Oh,
in
totally.
real life, it's a very lateral process.
Yeah.
And I see this as a problem where what some people have learned in a workshop or in school and so on, and they try to kind of replicate to bring that into the real world, and it doesn't work.
Well, they forget the most important word in design thinking, which is to iterate. If you iterate, it cannot be a straight line. It's very much dependent on context. It's situational. You have to be super adaptive, flexible. You have to do all the things that we've been talking about in terms of creativity.
Hey, it takes experience. It's a muscle. As you said, over time, you get better at it.
Yes, it takes practice.
Yeah. Natalie, thank you so much for today. I really enjoyed the conversation. You are such an inspiration. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Gjoko. Thank you for having me.